Hello and welcome. I'm Rosemary Pena, president of the Black German Heritage and Research Association. Today I'm here with students from Black Germans, Art and Resistance, a course I'm co-teaching at Davidson College with my colleague and BGHRA Executive Director, Dr. Emily Fraser-Rath. Emily is away today, so I'm pleased to share this virtual space with our students and our very special guest, the esteemed Elisabeth Clarke-Hasters. Elisabeth Clarke-Hasters, BGHRA consultant for the arts and culture, studied classical ballet and modern dance in Philadelphia, in North Carolina, and at the School of American Ballet in New York. She began her acting studies at age 13 and was a member of the Children's Repertory Theater in Philadelphia and the Poor People's Theater in New York. She was also a member of the Dance Theater of Harlem. She came to Europe in 1971 to study at the Mudra School of Maurice Béjart and dance with the Ballet du XXe siècle. You can correct me if I didn't say that properly. Before turning to choreography and teaching, she worked extensively with Karl-Heinz Stockhausen and Pina Bausch and performed as an actress in the municipal theaters of Köln, Düsseldorf, and Koblenz. Clarke-Hasters has been a choreographer for the Salzburg Festival, the Burgtheater Wien, the Maggio Musicale in Florence, the Oper Leipzig, among others. She was assistant school director in the Arturo Schauspielschule in Köln and school director at Die Etage in Berlin, where she also led the dance department until 2018. She has also developed several programs for dance in schools, specifically combining dance composition and STEM curriculum. In 2010, Elisabeth completed her training as a personal development coach and is presently developing several new programs, including a coaching program specifically for people of color. So now, without further ado, I'll turn the virtual microphone over to Elisabeth and our students. Elisabeth?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It was really nice to hear from you and to meet you as much as is possible in such a context like a class virtual. And yeah, I prepared a lot of stuff today. And after hearing you, I probably am going to throw out part of it and change up and try to meet some of your questions and your to follow your curiosity. But I will tell you what I prepared. Maybe you want to hear that too. It's about art and resistance. And I thought it might be interesting when, with my long background in the arts and my long background of resistance, that I just talk about what art is, which is a big subject, but I've boiled it down, and what resistance is. And then we can talk about how art and resistance works in the Black German context. Is that okay with everybody? Good. I'm relieved. Okay. Art. Art is made up of two components. Like all art is made up of two components. It's creativity and intentionality. So if you do something with intention, but it's not creative, it's possibly not art. If you do creative stuff, that's beautiful, but if it's lacking in intentionality, it's probably also not art. So to create is very simple. It's just to make something that where nothing was before. It's to fill a void. And one would think there's like enough going on that we have no more void. But anytime someone creates anything, the creation itself shows where the void was. So when people are creating, they are defining spaces. And this is interesting in the context of Black people in Germany, because there hasn't been a lot of space for Black people in Germany, and especially for Black Germans, you know, because they sort of were not supposed to exist. Black Germans, a lot of people still today cannot believe that there is such a thing as a Black German. And this gets very frustrating. You know, I know this from my own children, more or less having to demand to be accepted as what they actually are. But all Black people in Germany go through this defining the void. So that's like part of creation. And creation is not necessarily a difficult thing. Like children create all the time. I remember when my youngest daughter was very, very little, she was so fascinated with drawing. And so she would take a piece of paper and she would just make a mark on that, not even trying to draw a form or a shape, but just making a mark. And she was so proud of that and so fascinated that she could actually make something, that she used to go through stacks of paper, just taking a piece of paper and making a mark. And this is like the kind of creation that children do, and it's utterly without strain. You know, they don't, it's not a difficult thing. We tend to think of creating as something really, really difficult, but it can be something very simple, very lighthearted, very spontaneous, just making a mark. Good. Now, the other part of art is intentionality. And for this, I have an example of what intentionality does. There is a modern art museum in Berlin called the Hamburger Bahnhof. And it's an old Bahnhof. It used to be a train station, and then they turned it into an art museum. And in this museum, there's a painting, excuse me, there's a painting by Cy Twombly. And it's really big, a very, very big painting, and it's called Thyrsis. And what it looks like is it looks like just a page out of his notebook, where he just jotted down a sentence and was scribbling something. That's what it looks like. But it's like, I would say 4 meters by 3 meters. And when I saw this painting the first time, I thought, this looks like something that one would say, oh, I could have done that. But I know when I'm looking at it, I know I couldn't have done that. because I don't have the eye to know what part of my notebook, if I blow it up that far, would actually have a form that would provoke thought in other people. If I would do that, it would really truly just look like I scribbled something on a huge canvas. But Cy Twombly spent a lot of time learning his art, years and years, and going to art school and so on and so forth, so that when he reproduces a scribble out of his notebook, the proportions and the placement of things provokes thought and provokes engagement. So that is intentionality. Do you all get what I'm saying? Yeah, good. Now, the strain, where I said the children can create without strain, the strain is the whole time before, while you're learning your art. While you're learning anything that afterwards you have achieved a mastery in, the process of learning, of trying to grasp things, that's the strain. And it comes before creativity can be spontaneous and clear and still be art. In German, there's this saying, Kunst kommt von Können, which means art comes from ability. A lot of people think that it's enough just to have talent and then to do stuff, and then it's art. But that's not really the case. Part of talent is endurance, having endurance, and being able to stand getting it wrong. On the way to becoming an artist, you get it wrong all the time. And you get it wrong again, and you get it wrong again. Those people who can stand getting it wrong because they have an idea of where this is supposed to go, train their intentionality. Like for me, when I make a piece, when I do choreography, when I create something, I don't think it out first. I sort of have an idea of where I want to get to, and I just follow the inspiration. And this is an instinct that I follow, which is based on many, many years of experience. So to do art, you have to have an expertise and you have to work at it. And this is something that the Black German artists, Black artists in Germany, have really, really honed their expertise. They have to. We have to. Because the German society will not accept anything but excellence from people that they feel should be learning from them. So, in the Alice books, Alice Through the Looking Glass, I think, with the Red Queen, says you have to do all the running you can do to stay at the same place. And that's the story of artists, and especially Black artists in Germany. When I came to Germany, I lived in a communal flat with a whole bunch of economics students. They were studying economics and political science. That was the thing when I came to Germany. That was the thing that you did. You know, you studied economics and political science. And they sort of always wanted to teach me because I was a dancer. And they felt that I couldn't possibly know anything about a political situation because I was a dancer. And I was a Black dancer. So they just assumed that I had no idea. So that was a bit frustrating. And this tendency to want to educate me went on for years and years and years. And this is the tendency of German people, or let's say the dominant part of the society, white Germans, when they are, let's say, positive, they want to educate, they want to share, but they don't really believe that there can be an exchange. So they're always setting, there's always a hierarchy which is set up where the white Germans need to teach, educate. I would go so far as to say, way back in the back of their minds, they're thinking also to civilize Black Germans, Black people, and people of color. This is starting to shift, but it's shifting very slowly, and it's meeting with a lot of our next word, resistance. But before I go on and dominate the conversation, which should be a conversation, any thoughts about what I've said until now? You don't have to be so kind and just listen. You can say stuff too.
I had a question of the hierarchy that you kind of mentioned. Because there was a hierarchy in place between, like, in the institution, like there were the Germans who thought they should teach like the Black Germans. Did like the Black German like expression of art kind of move to a more private sphere instead of like that public space because you guys didn't feel taken seriously, or because the work wasn't really collaborative, but more so like, I don't know the word, like controlling?
Well, I got to Germany in the 70s. And the thing was, there weren't an awful lot of Black artists here. Germany sort of forgot that they had colonies. And so they saw Black people as exotic, and then there weren't a whole lot of Black people here, and even fewer Black artists. What seemed to be the way of Black artists when I got here in the 70s was entering the artistic spaces, which were mostly white spaces, and not necessarily in the experimental spaces, but in things like in ballet, lots of opera singers, lots of orchestra musicians. And then the things that we were sort of expected to do. So there were quite a few gospel choirs and so on and so forth. But as a means of self-expression, there were not a lot of people ready to strike out in that direction. And that has changed immensely in the past 10 years. Now there are even, I know of 2 dance companies which are exclusively Black artists, dancers, choreographers, and they're making pieces about their experience. Sometimes it's about their emotional experience. Occasionally it's really political. So with the growth of the Black population in Germany, these spaces have also grown. However, it's still not something that the white German public thinks is relevant to them. So mostly these pieces are for the community, where the community meets each other and meets itself. And I think that's like a phase that we have to go through as well, and it's just also when excellence in the arts shows itself, eventually people who at the beginning didn't really think that this was valid will come.
I have a question regarding the part about excellence. As a choreographer, and you've been doing this like for a pretty long time in Germany, a white-dominated area, you are of course aware that when this excellence presents itself in a Black dancing body or a non-white dancing body, it's not thought of, it's not thought of as excellence, it's thought of as this is what you were made for. The expertise is stripped out of that excellence, and it's just, yeah. How does your experience inform your perspective on that matter?
I can tell you that's really frustrating. It's really, really frustrating. I have heard more times than I would care to admit, yeah, but you have the rhythm in your blood. And so, it's like no surprise that you can dance. And I go, no. I worked on this. Like no one is a natural ballet dancer. Just doesn't exist. It's just like nobody can just pick up a saxophone and play it. So all the rules that are part of learning to be an artist are the same rules for white people and Black people. And I don't know why this sort of intimidates white people. So they think that, there's that trope of the magic Negro. So they think that Black people can all dance and all sing, and we can all do this, and it's in our DNA. Very frustrating. Does that answer your question, or should I go farther?
Super frustrating. That's part of what I was getting at, but I was also interested in like hearing about ways that you can communicate to people your perspective, as in, no, this is not me being magical, this is me putting in years of hard work into this in a way that is comprehensive.
Yeah, I mean, in my case, how I did that is I just tell people where I've been, who I studied with, and when I started to study. Then they can't deny that I had to put in the work. I would rather not do that. I would rather not do that, but if I'm doing classical ballet, it's easier because every ballet dancer knows that this cannot be done without putting in the work. If I'm doing more modern things, then people can think, yeah, that's just, it just sort of flows out of you. But I hear this from singers, opera singers, like you cannot be a lyric soprano without years of work. It's not just because Black people can sing. I'm a Black person and I sing like a frog. Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily in our DNA. Yeah, how to express this thing with excellence is just to be excellent, to be really good at what you're doing.
Thank you.
Sure.
I think I had a question based off the last dialogue in terms of you talking about art transcending you into a spiritual dimension while you're staying grounded in the real world, and why you thought, or like what was keeping other people from meeting you at that place.
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot because I sometimes also ask myself what keeps people from meeting me at that place. I think it's also the sort of shying away from recognizing and admitting that there is a spiritual dimension to all of these things. You know, I mean, a lot of contemporary society, and it's not just in Germany, a lot of contemporary society, especially like, especially this parts of society that have been dominant, have like, especially capitalist societies, have been pushed to achieve. Or we could say hustle, 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 hustle. Yeah. And the thing is, that spiritual dimension gets lost because just as you need time to devote to the so-called real things, you need time to devote to also understanding and developing your own spirituality and sharing that with others. And I think it's just a symptom of the society that a lot of people are not willing to admit that they also are looking for that dimension. And I think that's what keeps people from meeting on that plane. You know, I find this also within the Black community in Germany. There are people who are like really into this hustle, 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 hustle. And there also, I sometimes when I talk about things, they look at me as if I were an alien. I promise I'm not. Yeah, but I think that's the thing. I think it's not so much a question of hierarchy, it's a question of the style. Okay, or well, everybody, if you have no objection, I'll go on to resistance. Resistance. In German, resistance is Auflehnung. And Auflehnung means to lean against something. It's like, it would be, you would think, like pushing back or pushing against something, but in German, it's truly to lean on something. So the thing I find interesting about that word, meaning to lean on something, is that it means resistance does not have to be, let's say, active. You can just take a position, and through taking that position, you're already affecting and moving something. But my question is, what needs to be resisted? And this is a question I put to you. What needs to be resisted?
I'm guessing oppression.
Okay.
Like, oh, sorry. And the preconceived notion of a German identity.
Mhm. Victoria, you wanted to say something?
I was gonna also say the same thing as Jayla, just like the concept of like being German is the same as it was from like the 19th century, like into the 1800s, before like they like went in the beginnings and when they fully formed as a nation, that there is the concept of like what is German should be like continuous and something that changes over time. There shouldn't be like one set thing from way back when, and that shouldn't still be the standard for like today.
Mm-hmm. Any other things that need to be resisted?
Oh, Jayla, you can go first.
I just had a question, Miss Elizabeth, in regards to how you saw like and like particular for me, when I talked about Mujab's journey, I thought that he was playing into the system by trying to assimilate. So can you speak a little bit more on resistance and like how your personal experience, whether that has been like an active, constant resistance, or does it sometimes play into like assimilating or trying to fit into what Germany is, as that is still a part of your culture?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, to survive, I had to assimilate to a certain degree. You know, when I got here, we didn't have necessarily a large Black community. And so I couldn't embed myself in the Black community. I had to assimilate to a certain degree because I wanted to work as an artist. So I had to more or less show them that I could do the things that one expected, the choreographers expected, or the theater directors expected. I spent a lot of time also trying to convince people that I wasn't scary. This was actually, that led me to resistance, because at the beginning, I didn't really feel like I had to resist. It was just when people kept trying to teach me that I decided I was going to put up a bit of resistance there. I have some very funny anecdotes. Shall I tell you one? Only one. I was in the theater in Wuppertal, and we were doing a play called Das öffentliche Ärgernis, the public nuisance, I guess. And this play was written in the 30s, and it was based on the first visit of Josephine Baker to Germany and to Berlin, and it was a comedy. It was like a boulevard comedy, and I had the role of Josephine Baker, and the director didn't want to play it like one-to-one. He thought this would be kind of boring and trite. So he looked for different pictures to highlight different aspects, how theater directors do. And there was one scene where the Josephine Baker character was talking to the son of the rich guys, and they noticed a sort of attraction, and it was actually implied that this attraction was very sexual. And so our director was looking for a picture for that, and he came up with this thing. It's like an itch. So we were talking, we were doing our dialogue, and something was itching. And we kept doing the dialogue, and both of us had this thing that was itching in it. We just had to scratch it. And the longer the dialogue went on, the more it itched, and we had to scratch and scratch and scratch, which I thought was a really great metaphor for how the itch comes and it gets to be overwhelming, but you're not allowed to do anything about it. So at the end of the scene, we were both like just scratching like crazy. And when the intendant, who was more or less the person who was running the theater, he came and he saw a rehearsal, and he saw that, and he said, "You can't do that scene like that." I said, "Why not?" He said, "Because you're showing that all Black people have fleas." And I swear, none of us had thought of that. I mean, this had not occurred to anybody, that that's what someone would see. And he was the only one who saw it. And then he went on and on about how that's insulting to Black people, and how dare we do something like that. And he kept talking about the sensibilities of Black people, but I was sitting right in front of him. And because he went on and on, the rest of the actors started to notice, and they noticed that I was sitting there, and they were sort of going like, well, I mean, she just did this scene. She doesn't seem to have a problem with it. And he went on and on and on and wouldn't stop. And he finally said, "I'm not going to put that kind of a Black person on stage." And I thought, I asked him, "Please tell me what kind of a Black person you want to put on your stage." And he said, "Well, you wouldn't understand." And at that point, I just thought, okay, there's no getting through to this guy because he obviously doesn't understand who he's speaking with. So that was just like one instance of, how this desire of people to educate me, or let's say invalidate my experience. That's just one example. But there was a lot of that going on. And finally, it pushed me to be resistant to that, to push back, actually. But I told you this one because that one's kind of funny. There were some that were not so funny, but that was funny. Other questions? Comments? Claire, you wanted to say something.
I got really enraptured with your story and I forgot my question. I apologize.
I'm glad I'm not the only person that happens to.
Yeah.
Well, I'll go on then with resistance. And one of the things about resistance is also friction. Yeah. I mean, if I do this, when I'm not actively doing it, yeah, there's like, I don't feel the friction, but resistance is friction. And remember from physics class, friction is necessary for movement. And for me as a dancer, it was like understanding friction and using that and knowing how to apply friction to what I'm doing, or that was really important as a dancer. And as a dancer, you learn this, you learn resistance in a visceral way. You learn it with your body. You learn that there are things that are simply there, like the floor or other bodies. Or when you talk about society, you know that there are forces in society, or there are systems in society, and you have to, if you want to move, if you want to if you want to make any kind of progress whatsoever, you have to create this friction. Otherwise, you're just going to keep sliding off into the same things that have always been. So even if you don't think I'm going to resist, but you think I want to progress, you're going to create friction because of this kind of resistance. Now, what I find really important, and this is something that I'm trying to impart to my students and younger people that come to me for advice and so on, and guidance in Germany, is that resistance does not necessarily need anger. And that's very, very important, because I find anger takes up a lot of energy. And actually, if you stay angry for too long, it makes you feel bad. So you can have resistance without anger. And I mean, I thought of where is resistance without anger? And I thought of Henry David Thoreau and in Walden Pond. And he just said,
Uh-oh, Elizabeth, you've frozen for a minute. Let's see if we can get you back on. I hope you didn't.
okay,
Are we back?
yes,
Okay, sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened.
yeah. I just lost my thought, but I'll find it again. Resisting in the way of refusing the status quo. This is where Black German artists began to be able to find a voice that was not informed by the standards of the white audience. either in the sense of becoming like the white expectations of what art should be, nor in sort of like running up against walls, but finding a voice which was unique to them, telling the story that they wanted to tell, and not necessarily creating for the audience, but creating for creation, which draws the audience in. This this evolution of Black art in Germany really, I mean, it really started taking off with spoken word things, where that started to be the way to express in a way which is authentic to themselves. And this was very often done in a context that the audience was also all Black. You know, so it was like Black people, German, African, African-American, biracial people, binational people finding their voice and speaking, and in this case, truly speaking, for people that shared their experience. Inspired by this, then the next place where it started to blossom was in the visual arts, then in dance. And so now there's a real scene, a real art scene, which is specifically Black art in Germany. There's a whole scene, and it's developing more or less absolutely independently of the white artists and the white audience. It's very exciting, actually. But this is also a form of resistance. Some made their resistance, let's say, not leaning against, but pushing against. Some just said, I want to create, so I'm going to create. So all kinds of resistance, like the strong resistance or the resistance which is more, I'm just going to lean against this thing until it falls over. Yeah. And the thing is, art as resistance. This is when I've got to read what I wrote. Societal norms are rejected. You know, like that's where also the spiritual dimension comes in to play. Societal norms are not looking for a spiritual dimension in everything you do. In art, you do. Art can be read as political. It can be, and sometimes it's intended to be. But the intention of the artist, the most basic intention of the artist is to create. And creation is resistance. Creation is rejection of the status quo. Like I said, to make something where nothing was before. That's rejecting the status quo. I don't know if any of you guys have younger siblings, but if you think of the way they create, you understand the way things are isn't enough for them, so they need to do something else. So the way they create these children is a very natural way of resistance. The way artists create after having done all that work to create something, it's, like I said, defining the space and showing up the voids. That's resistance. So art in and of itself is resistance. Thoughts? Too many thoughts?
Mostly processing that and trying to like tie it or weave it together with our own conversation in class about like the interconnectedness between art and resistance and how one can be the other and the other can be like art can fuel resistance and resistance can fuel your art, and they can be both at the same time. It's just I'm still processing that. So there will be thoughts after the processing is done.
Good.
I have a question. So would you say that the way that people have created art and the way that they resisted has changed like pre and then post pandemic, especially, or not post pandemic, but like, I guess now, especially in Germany, like what is, like if anything's changed, like what is its significance?
Well, let's say a lot of artists are really exploring and trying to understand that things have moved to a new medium. You know, at the beginning, a lot of artists just sort of wanted to, especially performing artists, just wanted to put a camera in front of them, what they were doing, and do what they always did. And this did not work. And it took a long time for people to figure that out, that it doesn't work like that. And so there's more of a readiness to explore and to deal with new media and what multimedia actually really means. And what is also has really changed is that audiences are not coming to theaters and performance spaces. So artists have to find out where the people are. And sometimes it's over virtual, but sometimes it's like site-specific art. And so that's really something that had already begun before the pandemic, but it has blossomed. And since technology is advancing all the time, the possibilities to create art with technology are growing. And yeah, more and more artists are understanding that and exploring that.
I have a question kind of building off that. And like, how is Black German art kind of adapted with the new technology that's been coming out with like computers and all that? Like, how is it adapted in I can't think of the word, but just improving their, like, how it gets out?
Well, a lot of young Black people are really, really advanced in tech stuff. So within the Black German community, or the Black community in Germany, that's been something that really is, there weren't so many difficulties to jump into this experimental pool. So I think that in Black art in Germany, it's actually very advanced to this working with the different technologies, because there are a lot of people, a lot of Black people in Germany who are really, really good at tech. Sometimes it's even that within the Black community, there are more innovations and more discovery and experimentation than within the white community, the white artistic community.
So you spoke about the Black art scene in Germany and how it's kind of grown on its own outside of the white artistic scene. How does that, so I completely understand how that's like so powerful and beautiful and wonderful. How does that separation like impact access to resources, and like is there competitions for grants or gallery space or things like that, and how does that split impact Black artists?
Well, what's starting to develop is a kind of separation of the public. For example, the thing about like subventions and getting money from the state for art, there's still a lot of competition, and I've just been asked to be part of a panel in Cologne, in the Cultural Office of Cologne, that looks at how subventions are distributed amongst the arts community, so that there's enough representation of all kinds of other groups than the mainstream. So there's an awareness of this, but it's still sort of taking baby steps. And the Black arts community in Germany is at the moment producing for themselves, and mostly totally okay with that. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. My pleasure. So I think we'll sort of wrap up the question and answer period. And thank you for such great questions. You are really, really an inspiration.
Thank you so much, Elisabeth. And in closing, I'd like to express my sincerest appreciation to you, of course, and to our amazing students, and importantly, to Dr. Emily Fraser-Rath and Davidson College for making this conversation possible. Today's recording will soon be uploaded on our YouTube channel at Black Germans. Subscribe and turn on the notifications so that you will be advised as new ones are added. Visit our website at bghra.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Eventbrite for details about upcoming events and our February 2023 annual conference. We hope you've enjoyed today's conversations with our students and Elisabeth Clarke-Hasters as much as we've enjoyed sharing and learning among ourselves. So until next time, we thank you for your time and attention.